Dadperfectrevenge. That Tuesday morning in my kitchen, when Victoria slid those papers across the table with her perfect smile, I should have known something was wrong. The way she arranged them so carefully on the worn mahogany surface, like she was dealing cards in Vegas. The way her eyes never quite met mine when she said it was just temporary financial power of attorney. The way the morning light streaming through my kitchen window caught the gold lettering on those expensive documents, making them look more like contracts with the devil than family paperwork. I'm Benjamin Coleman, 62 years old, and after 28 years carrying an FBI badge, I thought I'd seen every kind of predator that walked this earth. Turns out the most dangerous one had been sitting at my dinner table for 3 years, calling me dad and playing with my granddaughter in the very living room where Patricia and I had raised our son. The papers were thick, cream-colored, the kind that scream legitimacy but feel wrong in your hands. Victoria sat across from me in my Portland kitchen, her blonde hair pulled back in that way that made her look like the successful investment advisor she claimed to be. The same kitchen where Patricia had made pancakes every Sunday morning, where Nathan had done homework at this very table, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays for decades. Now it felt like a crime scene waiting to happen. My son Nathan was at work. Sophia was napping upstairs in the room that used to be Nathan's, and it was just me and the woman who was about to try to steal everything I'd worked for. The house was quiet except for the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the same clock that had counted down the hours of my marriage, my career, and now apparently my financial independence. "It's really just a precaution, Ben," Victoria said, tapping her manicured nails on the table's surface. Each tap echoed in the silence like a countdown. "With your memory issues lately, we want to make sure everything's protected. Memory issues." That was the first red flag that should have hit me like a freight train. I've never had memory issues. Hell, I can still recite case numbers from 1995, remember the exact layout of crime scenes from decades ago. But she said it so casually, like it was common knowledge around the family, like everyone had been discussing poor old Ben's declining mental state behind his back. "What memory issues?" I asked, keeping my voice level. My hands rested flat on the table. The same hands that had cuffed hundreds of criminals, signed thousands of reports, held my wife's hand during her final moments. Victoria tilted her head with that sympathetic look women perfect when they're about to deliver bad news. The morning light through the lace curtains Patricia had hung years ago cast shadows across her face, making her expression seem even more calculated. "Nathan mentioned you've been forgetting things. Conversations we've had where you put your keys, he's worried about you, Ben. We all are." I watched her face as she spoke, cataloging the micro-expressions I'd learned to read during thousands of interrogations. The slight lift of her left eyebrow when she mentioned Nathan, the way her pupils dilated just a fraction when she talked about my supposed forgetfulness, the unconscious touching of her throat when she lied. Classic tells of someone constructing a narrative in real time. "I think I'd remember having memory problems," I said, my eyes never leaving her face. Her laugh was musical, practiced, the kind of laugh that had probably fooled better men than me. "That's the thing about memory issues, Ben. The person experiencing them is often the last to know." I looked down at the papers again, really studying them this time. Power of attorney documents, medical directives, something about asset protection trusts, all prepared by a law firm I'd never heard of in a city I'd never been to, all granting Victoria complete control over my $1.8 million retirement fund, my house that I'd bought with Patricia 30 years ago, even my late wife's jewelry collection that sat in our bedroom safe. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in like they do in interrogation rooms when suspects realize they're trapped. The familiar smells of coffee and the faint lavender scent from Patricia's soap that still lingered in the house seemed overshadowed by something else, something that smelled like desperation and greed. "Nathan thinks this is a good idea?" I asked, my finger tracing the edge of one document. "He suggested it. Actually, he's seen how stressed you've been since Patricia passed. He wants to take some of the burden off your shoulders." That's when I knew I was looking at a professional. She'd done her homework, mapped out the family dynamics like a military strategist, a grieving widower who might be losing his edge, an adult son caught between loyalty to his father and trust in his wife, a toddler who could be used as emotional leverage. She'd identified every pressure point in our family structure and was applying force exactly where it would do the most damage. I'd spent 3 decades hunting people like Victoria. The difference was, those predators went after strangers. This one had married into my family and spent 3 years earning our trust, learning our routines, mapping our vulnerabilities like she was planning a heist. "Where did you say you worked before you met Nathan?" I asked, setting the papers aside with deliberate care, Meridian Financial Group in Seattle. Portfolio management for high net worth clients. The answer came too quickly, too rehearsed, like dialogue from a play she'd performed before. And your maiden name again, Summers, Victoria Summers. Again, no hesitation, but her hand moved to her throat, touching the simple gold necklace she always wore. Another tell. The morning light was shifting now, casting longer shadows across the kitchen table. In the distance, I could hear the garbage truck making its rounds, the ordinary sounds of a Tuesday morning in a neighborhood where nothing bad was supposed to happen to families like ours. I pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping against the linoleum floor that Patricia and I had installed ourselves back in '98. I need to think about this. Of course, Victoria said, already gathering the papers with movements that were too practiced. Too efficient, but Ben, the attorney, needs these back by Friday. There are some tax advantages we don't want to miss. Always the deadline, always the urgency. Classic pressure tactics that I'd seen con artists use 1,000 times. Create artificial scarcity, manufacture time pressure, force the mark to make decisions without proper consideration. But I wasn't just any mark. I was a mark with 28 years of federal law enforcement experience. After Victoria left, taking her expensive perfume and calculated smiles with her, I sat in my study surrounded by the familiar smell of old leather and gun oil. The room Patricia used to call my cave, where I'd worked cold cases late into the night, where the walls were lined with commendations and photos from my FBI career. I hadn't opened a case file in 3 years, but my hands still knew where everything was. The computer hummed to life on my desk, the same desk where I'd written reports that put dangerous people behind bars. I started with the basics, the kind of background check I'd run on any suspect. Victoria Summers, Meridian Financial Group, Seattle. My fingers moved across the keyboard with muscle memory, accessing databases I still had legitimate access to through my retirement credentials. Within 20 minutes, I had my answer. No such company existed at the address she'd given me. The business license she'd mentioned belonged to a dry cleaner that had been closed for 5 years. The office building she claimed to work in, it was a vacant lot where they were building condos. My heart started beating faster, the way it used to when a case broke open. That familiar rush of pieces clicking into place, of seeing the pattern emerge from the chaos. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. Jennifer Mitchell, the voice on the other end, said crisp and professional. "Jen, it's Ben Coleman." "Ben Coleman," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "This better be good. I'm up to my neck in Ponzi schemes and Medicare fraud." Jennifer Mitchell had been my partner for 6 years before I retired, before she moved to the fraud division, where she specialized in financial crimes against the elderly. If anyone would understand what I was looking at, it was Jen. "I think I've got another one for you," I said, settling back in my leather chair. "And this time, it's personal." I told her about Victoria, about the power of attorney papers, about the memory issues I supposedly had. Jen listened without interrupting, the way she always did when she sensed a real case developing. I could hear her typing in the background, probably already running preliminary searches. "How long has she been married to your son?" she asked. 3 years in October. They met at some gym in downtown Portland. Long con then. These elder fraud rings are getting more sophisticated. Ben, they're not just targeting random seniors at the grocery store anymore. They're embedding operatives in families, sometimes for years before they make their move. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "You think she's part of a ring? I think you need to be very careful. If she's professional, she's probably not working alone. And if she spent 3 years setting this up, she's not going to walk away quietly when you say no." After I hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my study, thinking about the woman who'd been sharing Sunday dinners with us, who'd been in family photos, who'd held my granddaughter and called me dad, the woman who knew exactly where I kept my spare keys, who'd seen me enter my safe combination, who'd been cataloging the contents of my house for 3 years. That night, Nathan came by for dinner. It was our usual Tuesday routine, something we'd started after Patricia died to make sure neither of us got too isolated. I made spaghetti and meatballs in the kitchen where Victoria had tried to steal my life, using the same recipe Patricia had perfected over 30 years of marriage. We ate in the dining room at the mahogany table that had witnessed thousands of family meals, homework sessions, and heart-to-heart conversations. Nathan looked tired, the way young fathers always do, but there was something else in his expression. Something I couldn't quite read. Victoria mentioned she stopped by today, Nathan said, twirling pasta around his fork. She did. Wanted me to sign some financial documents. Nathan's fork paused halfway to his mouth. In that pause, I saw years of careful manipulation, months of planted suggestions, weeks of manufactured concern. "Dad, we talked about this. You've been struggling since Mom died, forgetting appointments, leaving the stove on. Victoria's just trying to help." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not because they were cruel, but because I could hear Victoria's voice in them. The exact phrasing, the careful emphasis, the loving concern that masked something darker. "Son," I said, setting down my water glass with deliberate control, "I've never left the stove on in my life, and my memory's fine. I can tell you what I had for breakfast 3 weeks ago, if you want, Dad." Nathan's voice had that patient tone people use with difficult elderly relatives. The tone that says you're being humored but not believed. "You missed Dr. Harrison's appointment last month. Victoria had to reschedule for you. I never had an appointment with Dr. Harrison. See, that's what I'm talking about." I looked at my son, really looked at him. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike in the driveway outside, who'd come to me with scraped knees and broken hearts, who'd called me from college every Sunday for 4 years. Now he was looking at me like I was a stranger, like I was a problem to be managed rather than his father. The conversation with Nathan stayed with me long after he left that night. I sat in my living room, surrounded by family photos that suddenly felt like evidence in a case I was building against my own daughter-in-law. The house creaked around me, settling into the familiar sounds of evening, but nothing felt familiar anymore. I went back to my computer, this time digging deeper than basic business verification. If Victoria was running a con, there would be traces. There always were. Predators might be clever, but they weren't perfect. And 28 years of federal law enforcement had taught me that everyone leaves digital footprints. I started with the wedding photos from 3 years ago, the ones from their ceremony at the botanical gardens that I'd helped pay for. Victoria looked radiant, Nathan looked happy, and I looked like a proud father welcoming a new daughter to the family. But now, studying her face with professional eyes instead of paternal ones, I saw something else. The way she positioned herself in every shot, always at the perfect angle, always camera ready, like someone who'd done this before. The FBI database access I still maintained through my retirement status gave me tools most people didn't have. I ran facial recognition software, cross-referencing Victoria's image against known criminal databases. It was a long shot, but long shots sometimes paid off. 6 hours later at 3 a.m. I got a hit. Diana Ross Parker. Real name, real criminal history. 3 arrests for fraud in Nevada, Arizona, and California. 2 convictions. 18 months in minimum security prison. Released 4 years ago, just in time to disappear and reinvent herself as Victoria Summers. I printed everything. Bank records, arrest reports, prison intake photos. The evidence I'd need to convince Nathan that his wife was a professional criminal who'd been playing a 3-year-long con game. Diana Parker specialized in what the Bureau called familial infiltration. She'd marry into wealthy families, establish herself as the trustworthy daughter-in-law, then systematically drain their assets before vanishing. Her last victim was a retired judge in Tucson named Harold Green. She'd walked away with $400,000 of his retirement money before anyone realized what happened. The judge's son had defended her right up until the day she emptied the accounts and disappeared. Sound familiar? The similarities were chilling. Same pattern, same methodology, even some of the same phrases I'd heard Victoria use. The careful concerns about memory, the gentle suggestions about financial protection, the way she positioned herself as the responsible family member looking out for everyone's best interests. But there was more. According to the case files, Diana Parker didn't work alone. She was part of a larger operation run by someone named Alexander Morgan, a man who recruited attractive women to infiltrate wealthy families. They called it marriage mining, a systematic approach to elder fraud that could take years to execute but yielded massive returns. The next morning, I called Nathan's office, but Victoria answered his phone. "Oh, hi, Ben," she said, her voice warm and concerned. "Nathan's in a meeting, but I'm glad you called. I wanted to talk to you about yesterday. I bet you did. I know this is hard. Change is always difficult, especially when we're dealing with cognitive decline. But I want you to know that Nathan and I love you, and we're going to take good care of everything." Cognitive decline. She was escalating the narrative, making my supposed mental deterioration sound more serious, more immediate, setting the stage for whatever came next. "Victoria," I said, choosing my words carefully, "I know who you are." The silence on the other end lasted exactly 4 seconds. Long enough for her to run through her options, calculate her response, decide how to play it. "I'm sorry, Ben. I don't understand. Diana Ross Parker. Born November 15th, 1992, in Reno, Nevada. Arrested for elder fraud in Phoenix, 2019. Convicted, served 18 months at Perryville Correctional Facility." Another silence. When she spoke again, her voice had changed completely. The warm, concerned daughter-in-law was gone. What replaced her was cold, professional, dangerous. That's a very serious accusation, Ben. The kind that could be seen as harassment or evidence of paranoid delusions. The kind that could put you back in prison. Could, If anyone believed you, but who's going to believe a confused old man with memory problems? A man whose own son is worried about his mental state? A man who's been telling people at the grocery store that his dead wife still talks to him? I felt ice water in my veins. I'd never told anyone Patricia talked to me. I'd never even thought it, let alone said it. But somehow Victoria had planted that story in the community, created witnesses to my supposed mental decline. What do you want from my family? I want what I've always wanted. Security for Nathan and Sophia. A stable financial foundation. Your $1.8 million would go a long way toward providing that. And then what? You disappear? Take them with you? I haven't decided yet. Depends on how cooperative you are, Ben. Depends on whether you want to keep seeing your granddaughter or whether you'd prefer to spend your remaining years in a memory care facility where paranoid old men can't hurt their families with wild accusations. The threat was clear, professional, devastating. She'd been building a case against me for months, creating a paper trail of supposed incidents that would support a mental competency hearing. My own son would testify against me, believing he was protecting me from myself. You're good at this, I said. I'm the best at this. And Ben, this conversation never happened. Your memory problems are getting worse. The line went dead. That's when I knew I was at war. I called Jennifer Mitchell back immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed her number. When she picked up, I didn't waste time with pleasantries. Jen, she knows I'm on to her. Diana Parker, the woman calling herself Victoria, she just threatened to have me committed. Slow down, Ben. Tell me exactly what happened. I told her about the phone call, about Diana's threats, about the systematic character assassination she'd been conducting for months. Jen listened, and I could hear her typing rapidly in the background. She made a mistake threatening you on a recorded line, Jen said. We're going to get her to make more mistakes. How quickly can you get to the Portland field office? Within 2 hours, I was sitting in a conference room that smelled like industrial coffee and government furniture polish. Agent Timothy Brooks from the Financial Crimes Unit had joined us, along with a tech specialist who was setting up recording equipment that looked like something from a spy movie. The plan is simple, Jen explained, spreading Diana Parker's criminal file across the metal table. You wear a wire, pretend to go along with signing the power of attorney and get her to admit what she's really planning. We need her confession on tape. What about Nathan? What about Sophia? Agent Brooks leaned forward, his expression serious. Mr. Coleman, based on the pattern we're seeing here, your son and granddaughter are in real danger. Diana Parker doesn't just steal money and disappear. In her last case, she took the victim's grandson with her when she fled. The boy was found 6 months later in a Canadian safe house. The recording equipment felt heavy against my chest as I walked into the downtown coffee shop 3 days later. Diana had chosen the location-neutral ground, she'd said, where we could work things out like family. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was already there, sitting at a corner table with the power of attorney documents spread out like a contract with the devil. She'd even arranged for a notary, a nervous-looking man in a cheap suit who kept checking his watch. I'm glad you came to your senses, Ben, Diana said as I sat down. Her smile was perfect, warm, completely artificial. I want to hear it from you, I said, keeping my voice steady. What happens after I sign these? You get to be a grandfather. You get to watch Sophia grow up. You get to have family dinners and birthday parties and all the things that make life worth living. And if I don't sign, the smile faded, revealing the predator underneath. Then Nathan's going to have to make some very difficult decisions about your care, about whether you're safe to live alone, about whether you should be around Sophia without supervision. You'd have me committed. I'd have you helped. There are very nice facilities for people with dementia. Ben, places where you'd be safe and cared for while your family manages your affairs. I don't have dementia. You called the police last week claiming someone had broken into your house, but nothing was missing. You've been telling people at the grocery store that your dead wife still talks to you. You tried to drive to the bank on a day when it was closed, insisting you had an appointment. These are serious symptoms. None of it was true, but it didn't matter. She'd been building a case against me for months, creating a paper trail of supposed incidents that would support a mental competency hearing. My own son would testify against me, believing he was protecting me from myself. What's the endgame here, Diana? Her hand froze on the documents. My name is Victoria. Your name is Diana Ross Parker, and you're a convicted felon who's running the same scam you ran in Tucson. She looked around the coffee shop quickly, checking for threats, for witnesses, professional paranoia kicking in. Prove it, she said quietly. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table between us. On the screen was her mugshot from the Arizona arrest. I already have. What happened next happened fast. Diana grabbed for my phone, but I was faster. She knocked over her coffee cup, drawing attention from other customers. She started to stand, but I caught her wrist. Sit down, Diana. The FBI is already here. That's when she saw them. Agent Brooks by the counter, Agent Martinez by the door, Jennifer Mitchell at the table behind us, close enough to hear every word through the wire I was wearing. Diana's face went through a dozen expressions in 3 seconds. Shock, anger, calculation, resignation. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Nathan's going to hate you for this. Nathan's going to understand. You have no idea what you've just done to your family. But I did know I'd just saved it. The arrest was quiet, professional. No handcuffs in the coffee shop, no scene for the other customers. Diana walked out with Agent Brooks like they were old friends leaving together. But I saw her face in the window of the FBI car as they drove away. Pure hatred, focused entirely on me. Nathan took it hard. When the agents went to his house that evening to search for evidence and explain what they'd found, he called me from the police station where they'd taken him for questioning. How could you do this, Dad? She's my wife. She's Sophia's mother. Son, I need you to listen to me. Her real name is Diana Parker. She's done this before to other families. Everything I'm telling you can be verified. I don't believe you. You don't have to believe me. Believe the evidence. It took 3 weeks for Nathan to accept the truth. 3 weeks of financial audits showing how Diana had been slowly draining accounts he didn't even know existed. 3 weeks of testimony from her previous victims, elderly men who trusted their daughters-in-law and lost everything. 3 weeks of evidence that the woman he'd loved was a professional predator who targeted our family from the very beginning. When it was over, Diana Ross Parker was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Her accomplice, Alexander Morgan, got 20. The elder fraud ring that had provided her with false identities and financial backing was dismantled, but the damage to families like ours would last forever. The hardest lesson I learned wasn't about spotting predators, it was about accepting that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we invite closest to our table. And the only way to protect your family is to trust your instincts even when everyone thinks you're wrong. 3 years ago, I thought retirement meant my job was done, but I discovered that protecting your family's future is the one assignment that never ends. And sometimes experience is the only weapon that matters when love gets weaponized against you.